Hi, it's Mike Stephenson. In this video, we're going to take a look at Serverless 360 and how we can use business activity monitoring to help IT operators have visibility of complex PowerShell jobs that might be running on a VM or in Azure. So the challenges that we look to address with Serverless 360 are predominantly based around the idea that support for solutions built with Azure shifts all the way over to the expert and the Azure developer who has to do most of the support. So things like business users and support operators have no visibility, or they find the solutions too complex for them to work with. So they can't really do much of the support or see what's happening with the solution, which is why everything escalates up. So in Serverless 360, we've got these four modules where the aim is to give you the tooling to help you have a better support experience. Business applications is about managing Azure resources in Azure. Documenter is about generating common documentation for your Azure solution. Cost Analyzer is aimed at helping you be efficient on how you spend your money on Azure. And then Business Activity Monitoring is intended to provide a higher level of abstraction above your technical components so you can manage a process, something like an order process or a background job, in the business function context rather than the technical components. So this is the module we're going to take a look at today to see how we can help, how this module can help us solve problems supporting PowerShell. So the aim is that by using the module, so we're going to predominantly focus on this BAM module today, and we're going to try and let support users have visibility of these key jobs. The aim is to shift support this way to free this person up so they can do more time, spend more time delivering new functionality for the business users. So let's take an example of an automation with PowerShell. So here we've got an automation account in Azure. Inside this, we've got the PowerShell runbook. Now, these can be used to do a number of different kinds of things. So some of the things you might do might be the management API on Azure. You might use your runbook to automate stuff. You might call out to other systems, FTP sites, a number of different things depending on what kind of automation you need. Maybe you're doing stuff with Active Directory or Entra ID, for example. You might have a scenario where you use the runbook to schedule your job, or you might have a logic app that triggers a job and waits for it to execute. So there's a lot of things you can do with a PowerShell runbook in an Azure automation account. Another example might be you've got a PowerShell script on a VM. So you've got a VM, whether it be on-prem or in Azure. You might have a scheduled task on that VM, which would trigger a PowerShell script. And then let's say the script goes and activates something on Exchange. You might be doing something with Active Directory. You might just be copying files around. And a lot of those common IT administration jobs where an IT admin might just do a script to automate something and have it running. Now the problem is that your IT admin over here is busy doing all this other stuff, and anytime there's an issue here, a business user might get affected by that script not running. So we have some issue over here. They have no idea what the problem is. And this person has to come off their tasks to go and troubleshoot what's going on. So the aim would be if we can create visibility to see that this job's ran, then the idea would be an IT level 1 support operator could go and see if the job had actually ran. You could potentially give visibility to the business user if they know that they depend on that job. They could see if it ran or not as well. There's lots of ways you can create visibility here. So how this would look in, let's take the automation account example again. So using PowerShell's ability to call a REST API, we've got the Serverless 360 BAM module up here. it exposes a REST API, and we can just use our runbook and make calls from the PowerShell script to the API. So we could do a start transaction, and we could do a checkpoint. So a checkpoint's really just updating the state of a transaction. We can just add that to our PowerShell script at the points that make sense and sort of treat it a bit like a centralized login API to see what's going on in this script. So here we are in my Serverless 360 portal. You can see that I'm over in the business activity monitoring module here. And I've got this structure of my organization. And in my IT department, I've got a business process that I'll use for my IT automation jobs. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to create a really simple transaction here called daily file archive job. And I can go into the editor here and we can add new shapes to it. For example, so I could put a test shape on here and I could choose, I can add it, so for PowerShell, I'll just add a custom stage. This indicates where it executes at. So I added PowerShell as a stage and we can just add that shape to our diagram here. And you can see here I've got two shapes already representing the start and finish of my job. And what I can do on these shapes is I can configure properties. So for example, here I've configured a property called machine name that I'm going to pass from my PowerShell script as a header. And then it can be used to sort of create a grid of easy to see properties that help you know what's going on in your job. Now I can also create other properties, so I've got a load of different properties I've set up here, and I can use things like XPath, JSON path, or headers to promote these properties at runtime. And what we're going to do is once we've got our transaction designed, we would then use PowerShell to call the API and tell it we've started a process and which of these boxes we've executed. Now, what that looks like in the automation account is over here. You can see I've got my automation account. I've got a bunch of runbooks here. My BAM demo runbook. If we go and take a look at this, so I can edit the code in the portal, and I'm reading here. I'm getting from my automation account variables. I'm getting the URL and the API key for BAM. I've set a couple of variables for the business process name and the transaction name, so that correlates to the business process here and the transaction here. And then I'm saving a variable, so when we create the start transaction, we'll get an ID back, and I'll just pass that on subsequent calls to do an update. And also I can create some headers here, so these are going to be just any metadata I want about the job, so you could maybe save things like the user that it's running as, or some other date or time or something like that. I've then got some helper functions. So here I've got the start transaction. So this is going to make an HTTP call using the invoke REST method down here. You can see I need to supply some headers. So I need to supply the key for my API, and I need to supply things like the business process name, the stage, etc. I can also supply a message body, so I can pass in some text to this function, and I can pass in, I can use the collection of headers up at the top here. I can supply them as well, and that would basically go as the body on the HTTP call, and that would appear in BAM. I can then do a checkpoint, so you can see I pass in the transaction ID, the stage name, which is the shape on the diagram, the status, which will be succeeded or failed, message body, and is it complete or does it keep going? And then I just do the exact same thing here. So I set the headers, I make an API call, and I can reuse these functions in my PowerShell script to update BAM. So if we look at what my script actually does, you can see I just log the start of the script. I then make a call to BAM to start the transaction. So I say process started, it was succeeded. I can pass in a string. That'll start my BAM transaction. And then I'm just going to simulate doing some work by doing a loop, processing some records, doing a sleep for a few seconds, and then I'm going to do my BAM checkpoint. So I pass in the ID here, tell BAM it's complete, tell it the stage name, which is on the diagram, and then I can also, if there was an error, I can pass in a checkpoint call that says the process complete stage failed, and I can pass in. So here I'm just getting the error variable, and I'm just going to pass that in as the message body, so that would show up in BAM. Now, if I had a much more complex script, all I would do is I would just put these checkpoints at various points in the script so that I can see what's going on. When my job then runs, it's going to make calls out to BAM, and I would be able to see these show up here. So you can see I ran this job just a few minutes ago, and I can see the machine names, the host that the automation account's running on. I can see my job. I could actually add other properties if I configure other properties for whatever, say we've got an email parameter gets passed into the job. We could promote that and make that show on the grid here. So if anybody wanted to troubleshoot for a specific email, they could just search for that. I would then be able to do queries here. So for example, I could do an advanced query, choose the properties that I want to search on, and fill the form in and basically build a query that would let me search. So let's say we choose a machine name. So we just say machine name like sandbox or something like that. And you can see we'd build our query there, and I could run that. Now, if we had any errors, let's say this one was an error, that would show up under the action required tab. So I haven't actually had any errors since I ran the job, but they would show us a to-do list of jobs that failed that I haven't sorted out yet. So what I could do is each time I sort the job out, I could do one of two things. So maybe I could build a logic app where I can resubmit a message from BAM to a logic app that would call the PowerShell runbook again and rerun the job, or I could just choose to ignore it or something like that. Now, when I'm tracking these jobs, so let me just run the search again. So when I'm tracking these jobs, what I can do as a support operator is I can come in and say, right, that's the one I want to look at. So I can see the stages that have been ran. So I could click on a stage. I could see the message body that the script sent up to BAM. So you could have some custom advice for the support operator. I can see the properties here. I can go on to the second job, and I can have a look in here, and I can see, here's the message body that got passed at the end of the job. So this is a way as a PowerShell developer. So if your script's running on-prem or on a VM or in an automation account, you would just send information to BAM, and then you don't need the IT admin to troubleshoot all of these jobs. You could actually have a level 1 or 2 support operator could go into BAM and say, we got an alert, this job failed. We can go in and have a look, and maybe it's something really easy. Maybe it's that you call a system from PowerShell that's offline, and you can ignore the job. You can reach out to another support team who look after the application that was down, get them to fix that problem, and then rerun the job. So this is all potentially taking load off your PowerShell expert who's busy doing lots of other things, and letting your level 1 and 2 support team do more of these low value support tasks that at the minute they have to escalate up to a developer or an IT admin. Now, in addition to the view here, we can also do things like save transactions. We can favorite it. So I could go and say, mark this one to say Mike favorite it. And I could come back after lunch and I would be able to see it here easily. And I could work on that transaction. If we had loads of jobs running, you can keep an eye on one for troubleshooting purposes. I could assign it to another developer. So if I wanted the PowerShell developer to have a look at this job, I could go and click this and I could assign it to one of the other people on my team here. So I could assign that to Sri Harry, for example. I can build my own custom searches. So if I had lots of jobs, I could build a search just for specific types of items in this grid. I can also have dashboards. So if I had, you'll get this dashboard with a few widgets on it, but you can use your own queries to add other widgets. So let's say you wanted to look for failures of a specific job type, you could easily add a dashboard widget for that to show how successful your jobs are. And then the final piece is monitoring. So anytime you have an incident, you would see them show up in the incident log here. You can acknowledge them and close the incidents as they, as the jobs are sorted out. You can look for a long running job. So let's say if my file archive job normally takes less than 10 minutes, but occasionally we have a problem that takes longer, so I can create a threshold where if it goes beyond 10 minutes, it'll give us an alert to tell us there could be a pending problem about to happen. We could do an exception monitor that says anytime you get an error, raise an alert for that. And then we can even do things like define an escalation policy. So here I'd be using the default policy, but I can define a custom policy where if nobody deals with an issue where one of the jobs errored by a certain period of time, it'll escalate it to the next level of support and somebody would be able to jump in then and deal with it. So it's quite a good way of giving good management experience around these jobs. And the final piece would be a query monitor. So I can go and define a query here and say, like if a good example that I like for using query monitor is, let's say the job didn't run, so there was no error, so nobody knows that there's a problem because there's no error. If the job didn't run, you could use BAM to say we expect at least one of this run of job per day. If we don't get that, raising an error because the job hasn't ran, which I think is a really good gap that a lot of support use cases have. If there's no error, how do you know there's a problem? Thank you for listening to today's video. We hope you enjoyed that. We hope that you see there might be a use case in your organization to use this centralized login capability with BAM to help have visibility of key PowerShell scripts that people forget that are running, don't have visibility of any errors. Please reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about this. Thank you.